We're live on another episode of All Things 3D. Today
Yes.
it is Week in Review, our Friday special edition episode every week. It is December 5th, 2014. I'm your co-host, Chris.
Hi, and I'm Mike, and am sorry for our tardiness today, but we had a couple of technical glitches, and we thought we would get those done or out of the way before moving on today. Also, I'm sorry if any of you tuned in last Friday and didn't see us, because we actually did it on Wednesday before the Thanksgiving holiday, so this is actually going to be a long stretch of news. So on that note, Chris, take it to the first item.
All right. Well, my first big item for today was I noticed that there's been some resolution with the 3D Systems IP war with Formlabs. So if you remember, in the Formlabs released their Form 1 basically through Kickstarter. They were successfully funded many times over. And but during the kind of the early phases, they were slapped with a lawsuit with 3D Systems, and it kind of fizzled out. It seemed like for a little while, but apparently they have found a resolution and settled on an 8% royalty. So Formlabs is paying 8% of their sales to 3D Systems, is according to MakeZine.com. So Make Magazine is reporting on this, and they were.
Now, does that include all the back sales as well?
I'm sure that it's all sales. Yeah, I would imagine that it has. It's probably since the inception. So good and bad news. I mean, it's good news that it's finally they found something they could agree on. Basically, that 8% is most likely going to be just passed along to the consumer, ultimately in the end. So people just be paying 8% more for the machine. And the Formlabs machine
or maybe
good.
not. Maybe that was already built into the cost. Who knows?
Well, either way, it's going to be built into the cost.
Well, does it say in this? I guess they haven't done an interview with Formlabs. Hey, maybe I'll contact them and see if they'll come on and kind of talk about it.
I'm sure.
But yes, it'd be interesting to see if they're going to just build it to the initial or the original cost, or if they're going to, as you mentioned, add it on or tack it on to their cost at this point. I think right now, what is it, about $3,200, 35, somewhere in there. So 8% of that, so you're looking what, $240? Is that right? No. I don't even know how to do math anymore.
I don't know, the big companies definitely, these 700-pound gorillas are definitely, trying to continue to use the legal system to their advantage, not necessarily not necessarily because Formlabs really violated any patents or anything, but they just know that they have bigger attorneys than these guys.
I mean,
on
even with bigger
Kickstarter.
attorneys, obviously they were encroaching on something. Otherwise, I mean, we heard the behind the scenes in the documentary, Print the Legend, that there was some concerns there, and they also interviewed the CEO, and that they were initially going to really push hard, and then they said, well, we're going to see what we can work out. And I haven't followed this patent. Maybe I'll put a little more effort into it. The good thing is they didn't tell them to stop making it. And as you said, the bad thing is that they have to pay for that. But they've got a year already, and they pretty much are the SLA market. I mean, obviously there's a lot of smaller, but if you think of SLA, who do you think of? You don't think of 3D Systems. You think of the Form 1 or Formlabs. So yeah, I think overall it's a positive, but that's just my opinion. One other thing, I noticed you went out to Make. I just want to remind people that Make has this great special end of the year what do you want to call it, monthly
Shootout.
magazine, that shootout that goes through and reviews a lot of the 3D printers that we talked about last week, if you want to go ahead and follow us. So please go out there, buy it. It's got a lot of good information, plus some tips and tricks and some reference materials for you to use as you're testing maybe another model or for your own use. So there's plenty of stuff, and Make is just great all around. They've got always a lot of good articles, and so I think it's worth subscribing to. So on that note, I'm going to move into my next item, if you don't mind, Mr. Chris.
Awesome.
And some of you may have heard of this earlier on, but they finally did a little behind the scenes. And if you don't mind, Chris, do you mind if I play it?
Go for it.
It's about 3 minutes, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah,
I hear the sound there?
Not yet. I do
not.
Brought to be
Okay,
part
how
of this
about now?
There we go.
process.
Yeah,
It's called
yeah.
our mobile light stage. It's
Okay.
right over
Now
there.
this guy is
and we're setting
interesting
it up right
because
now
you'll
so that
find
you
out
can
later
use to
on,
record
he's a
almost
huge
certainly the
researcher
highest
in this
resolution
process that they're
digital model
talking
that's
about.
ever been made of a head of
And I'm going to go into more detail on what they're actually doing. This isn't necessarily photogrammetry, it's a whole new process.
President Obama really comes from the Lincoln Life Mask in our National Portrait Gallery. And I have a Lincoln Life Mask with me today, and they're called Life Masks because these were directly taken from his likeness. So there was plaster put on his face, there were 2 little holes poked where the nostrils were so he could still breathe, and seeing that made us think, what would happen if we could actually do that with a sitting president, using modern day technologies and tools to create an experience that connects us to history, connects us to a moment in time, and connects us to a person's likeness.
So the process should go relatively quickly. We will invite the president to sit down. He will be surrounded in front by 50 custom-built LED lights, 8 high-resolution sports photography cameras, and an additional 6 wider-angle cameras. In about 1 second, as he holds his presidential pose, he'll be illuminated by 10 different lighting conditions, which will change the polarization of the light, the directionality of the light, and will give us everything that we need to understand the shape of his face and how it transforms instant illumination into the images that we see of him. 10 years ago, it was just barely possible to think this could be done.
So here we have a structured light 3D scanner, and we're using this to scan the president. They're handheld. They're flashing a fringe pattern of light, and there are stereo cameras recording how that fringe pattern forms over geometry, or in this case, the president's face.
The president getting his likeness scanned, as cool as that is also about a broader trend that's going on, and that is the third industrial revolution. It's the combination of the digital world and the physical world that is allowing students and entrepreneurs to be able to go from idea to prototype in the blink of an eye.
It's been a few days since we've 3D scanned the president, and we're looking at some raw data on screen right here. So this is the data that came out of the handheld scanners that Adam Mattel and I were using to scan the president.
This is the first bust that's created of a head of state from objective 3D scan data. So this isn't an artistic likeness of the president. This is actually millions upon millions of measurements that create a 3D likeness of the president that we can now 3D print and make something that's never been done before.
So what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think they did a phenomenal job. I'm getting some guests on my...
Really, really cool. Are you getting some feedback? Okay, hang on a second. We'll get rid of that right now. Okay, are we okay?
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely checked that video out yesterday. I think whoever these guys are, they did a tremendous job.
Well, and actually, I'm going to go into more detail behind the scene because I was very interested. If you notice in the beginning of that video, and it shows it right here,
the light array is amazing.
Right.
Whatever they're
and
using.
I remember when I did some seminars, in 2009, that the United States Army was using a similar technique to capture different lighting systems for a video game. Do you remember the U.S. Army video game?
Oh, yeah.
That obviously had a lot of
Militainment.
controversy. Yeah, militainment. A lot of controversy behind it, but what they don't tell you with this is the guy who designed is from, I think it's, do you say University of California, Berkeley?
He was, USC.
USC. Yes. So he's from USC, and he's big into this, and he actually developed this, and he's been at SIGGRAPH on numerous occasions talking about this, and I'm going to kind of go into that. But if you want to know more about it, there's a page out on CNN. Then you can also go to the Smithsonian, and they talk about it. And one of the questions that was asked is, will this be available to the public, meaning the 3D model, so you could print your own Obama? And they say currently not at this time. And so I thought, you know, I remember that technique, so I thought I'd do a little more research. So I found this cool site called FX Guide, which I've signed up for and I'm going to subscribe to. Since I also like the 3D special effects, that's how I got started in 3D to begin with. And I remember this technique, the Art of Digital Faces at ICT, Digital Emily, Digital Ira. I remember Digital Emily. I don't know if you remember seeing this, but essentially, and here's an interview, and you can go out to it and listen to it. But it talks to the same guy who is a professor and researcher out at USC that invented this type of technique. And what he does, let's see if we go through. I don't want to get into that yet, but this was a big sensation because it allowed them to create super realistic faces, because they captured the specular information by using polarized light and a lighting array. And what they were able to do is remove that specular just to come up with the diffusion of the texture itself. So they were able to create very realistic. In fact, that where you can see my cursor here, this is actually the model here on her face, and she's talking, and you don't know that it's not her until the very end, and even then it's very indistinguishable. So it's Emily, so go out and find that on YouTube. Pretty cool. But more importantly, in the last, was it this year or previous year, they came out with Digital Ira. They took this same technique and made it real time. So this character you see here is not video. This is a three-dimensional object that they were able to capture from ear to ear and all the facial animation and move it in real time using the NVIDIA. So it was a compilation of NVIDIA, Activision, as well as ICT, I think is the name of the company. USC ICT. And they showed this off at SIGGRAPH, and I think they said they did it in a 4K video at the NVIDIA booth. So I don't know if they had this available for download yet, but again, it's on YouTube. Amazing stuff where they've come at. And plus, if you go out to this particular article, it talks about some of the milestones of creating faces. You remember the movie Curious Case of Benjamin? So where I'm going with all this is, not only did they capture 3D information that they can create a bust that they can put with the rest of the bust out at the White House, but by capturing this, they can create life animations. So if you look at this guy here, imagine next press release, it's not Obama, but his 3D character talking. See where I'm going with this, Chris?
Oh yeah. I was already thinking of stuff when I saw it. I was like, wow, they could really, if they got a hold of those 3D files, they could have an imposter pretty quick, you know?
Yep. And that's what I was thinking as well, so maybe that's why it's not really. And more than likely, well, who knows? Maybe the North Koreans will crack that system too and do their own movie. But I thought that was pretty cool, so back to you, Chris.
Don't put the president's bust on SOTI's hard drives. All right, so next news item for me, this one's brought to us by 3ders.org. And apparently Stratasys introduces a free 3D printing curriculum to help prepare students for future careers. Stratasys announced a 14-week curriculum for students that want to get into 3D printing, everything from design to preparing STL files and then getting them ready for additive manufacturing. So here's kind of a brief overview of the unit dynamics. Here's some students pulling off 3D parts out of the machine. It looks like a beautiful Fortis 250 MC. That's my favorite machine. And here's units 1 through 8, 9 through 14, and then extra units, everything from the history of 3D printing to parametric design, and then all the way up to final presentations and demonstrations, it says. So pretty cool. They've
Now, is this an online course, or do you have to physically be there?
I would imagine it's a physical course that you need to be at a, but I'm not sure. It didn't mention that, I don't think, in the, but I'm sure they'll make an online, something that I'm sure they'll add an online version.
Yeah,
of
actually,
this.
if you stop, it mentions Singapore, and in the U.S., it looks like the Institute of Boston is already using
And
the printing curriculum.
I think that this curriculum, it looks like it's like here's a
Yeah, it says free materials. Did you
free
just drop
material.
there?
Yeah, I think
Why
this
don't
is for current schools, like colleges or junior colleges, universities, or even high schools.
You know what? Maybe we should talk, Chris.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's get a sanctioned course going here on the coast.
There you go.
Okay, pretty cool. All right, so on to my next item, courtesy of, who the hell are they? Actually, it's Whitney, but let me bounce to my screen. Let's see, 3dprint.com. An excellent place to go to for news as well. But Whitney writes about the Autodesk taking orders for the Ember 3D. And before we get started, let you know that I have already signed up for this, but I did not know, and I'll go out to the page to show you, what the cost of it is. And that might be a deal breaker. So here it is, and obviously it's really cool looking. But, you know, as Jesse alluded to, the actual print size isn't very big. In fact, it's about the same size as what we can do with our little RP. And but they say because of the machining of it, the quality is phenomenal. Didn't Brian kind of indicate it was like 10 microns or something like that? So very precise. In fact, even a Z might be close to 1 micron, if I remember correctly. So that's the advantage of it. And the reason I bring that up is that, one, you can join what they call the Ember Explorer Program. And you pretty much have to identify what you're working on, why you think it's important that they pick you to be part of it. And then it sits in a queue, so I don't know if they'll get to me. But here's a closer, I mean, look at the quality of that. Doesn't it look nice?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very pretty.
Obviously, those are all renders, but...
No, are you sure that's a render?
It looks like a render to me.
Yeah, it does look super clean. So, and today, how can you tell? In fact, I was going to wait till next week, but look at the price, close to 6,000. That's that's in the same range as the 3D system, the one that we talked about last week in our reviews. So you're looking at the same price range, but the build size is about the same. So it's a little, well, I wouldn't say pricey, I guess, for the quality you're paying. What do you think, Chris? What's your opinion?
Well, I mean, the little RP being about a $900, about $1,000 machine, and I was pulling parts off of it yesterday that were 50 micron, and they looked phenomenal. So, I think the real challenge with SLA is there's two major things that are kind of barriers right now. One is the software, because that leads into the next point, which is repeatability. So being able to have consistent results all of the time. And I think another big challenge is containment of the material, or how you recapture material, how you clean the models, going from one print to the next. It's a challenge. SLA is a little bit. It's more challenging than typical FDM or FFF style printing. I mean, we're going to have to figure out how there's going to need to be not just the machine, but you need a cleaning center to clean the parts, wash the parts. Finish curing them, and that kind of thing. So,
yeah, and if you remember, Chris, I have a Form 1, have had one for a year, and I totally agree with what you're saying. And you do have to put some extra cost in if you want to use different materials. I have trays that are pretty much dedicated to one particular type of resin, and that's all I use in it. And I have like 5 of them, but they're like $50 a pop. That's not too bad. So if you've only got one tray, it makes it difficult. I think the Form 1 kind of went in the right direction, but as you said, you have to create a cleaning station as well. You have to wear gloves. It's a little messier, and repeatability, well, in my opinion, they're pretty slow. So it's good for doing one-offs, high detail, and then going to another technique, like creating molds or something like that. But using them, and plus the material isn't as strong as an FDM printer. That's supposedly changing. Made Solid has some new materials. Who else has it? Formlabs himself has come up with a stronger material. So if you're doing something with extremely great detail, I think you can't beat it. But like you said, it's for repeatability and just cost effectiveness. It's not the best direction. So as you indicated, you can get a little RP for 1,000 with a standard XGA print DLP projector. A little bit more if you want to go with an HD, which gives you a little bit better resolution on the XY. But if you want to look at the Autodesk Ember, here's the website. It's called the Ember Explorer, and then you just request an access pass and fill out the information. Oh, I guess I didn't look far enough. Down here it does identify the price at being $6,000 or $5,995. Okay, so on to your next item, Chris.
All right. So next up for me, this is just a cool one. This is, again, from 3ders.org. It's titled, Swedish architecture firm plans to build SwimCity, 3D printed housing on the water. I want to live here. So it says that Swedish architecture firm Bellachew Architecture Architecture spelled
Architecture.
Architecture.
Let's see,
Yeah,
where are they
sorry,
from?
I'm not a Swede. Proposes a project that aims to increase the supply of housing for young people, SwimCity. And it's apparently a floating housing project. They're going to use 3D printing somehow to fabricate some of the buildings, and which kind of goes along with this Chinese company that's been 3D printing 10 houses in a day from recycled materials. Again, these Swedes are using recycled materials, they're saying, to 3D print concrete and make a building complex called SwimCity. Looks like
So is this still in the design phase, or are they actually moving forward with it?
Yeah, it's still design phase for sure.
So even they're proposing to use recycled materials where they
Well,
actually...
it says that it's supported by the Swedish National Board of Housing, Building and Planning, and the building will be located on the surface of the water. It sounds pretty confident that they're going to build this thing, so I don't know. We'll have to do more research and kind of follow up with the story as it progresses, but I'm sure we'll hear more about it in the coming months.
Yeah, very cool. And as you said, the Chinese, we talked about it, 6-7 months ago, that built a 3D house. Didn't look very good, but it is 3D printing of some sort. Okay, so on to my last item. We're going to jump into the VR world. If you're an Oculus VR DK2, they just released 0.4 beta. Nothing really big in it. They've added some, not necessarily even added anything. They've made some more modifications. Over the weekend, I wanted to use it as a segue. I did some experimenting. Finally got Half-Life up and running. And also Alien Isolation. I don't know if you heard of that game. It was released in October. It's been very popular. It's a first-person, I wouldn't say shooter per much as an investigator, but you're being chased by an alien. And very claustrophobic. But the story's kind of neat. It actually, if you remember in Aliens, they cut out a part where Ripley had a daughter. So they kind of built this story around that, where Ripley's daughter actually comes out to look for Ripley. So that's kind of neat. So you play her as the protagonist. And I tried it with this. Somebody actually got it working, and man, is it awesome. It is. I mean, you if you've played video games, and I don't play a lot of them, but Half-Life was my favorite. It is different when you look at a screen, even though it's 3D and you're moving, it is not the same sensation of you moving in an environment, and that's what the Oculus Rift does. And when you move around, you move your head, you can go up to items, and depending on the textures, it looks like you can go out and touch it. So I'm hoping haptic feedback comes soon. But yeah, you feel like you're in the room, not just looking at the room, and it's a completely different feeling. I will have to say I normally don't get sick with this. Playing these games because you're rushing around and actually being active, the fact that your feet aren't moving, I think, tells your brain something's wrong. But I'd say after about 20, 25 minutes, I did feel a little uneasy with it. So you have to take a break with it. But I'm thinking with training, I could live in that world forever. No, just kidding. Siobhan would hate me. Oh, wait, she already does. Okay, so on to, I've got plenty of new stuff to talk about, but if you've got something you want to bring up, please go first.
No, I think we're on to the next.
Okay, well, gosh, then I will jump right into my next item. Let's see, there's a couple of things. One thing, if you remember last week I was talking about Astrobox or Astroprint. Do you remember that, Chris?
Yeah.
It was a Kickstarter project done by our favorites. Actually, you brought them into, what was it, 3D A Go-Go? Do you remember them? You brought them in. We did an interview and had them on one of our roundtables, but then they put this Kickstarter together, which is another one of those internet or LAN remote connections to your printer. But the neat thing about this is it's all contained, even though you can go out to the website to actually do slicing in the cloud, you don't need it. It's a connection directly to it, and I've used it. A benefit of this version over the one we talked about 2 weeks ago is that this one allows you to do G-code. And we know that's coming in the previous version we talked about. What was that called again? Do you remember?
Print to Pi.
Print to what?
Print to Pi.
Okay.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, I am. And this one's called Astrobox. Actually, the term Astrobox, they make a little box that you could have bought on Kickstarter, but the software was available, meaning the image for Raspberry Pi, and then a couple of other, I don't want to say Arduino, but small boxes. So they have some images already. I think it was like $20, $25, so it's a very reasonable Kickstarter. So I downloaded it, purchased a B+, put it in it. The nice thing about it is that it supports any Linux driven USB camera, which means all the Logitechs. So I just hooked up one of my older Logitech webcams to it, and it works. So what you're seeing here is the actual interface. I've connected to it, and I could literally go ahead and start printing this, which I'm going to. I don't know what's going to happen. I'll probably have to cancel it. And then it tells you your heat up, so you have to tell it beforehand what kind of printer, but really you don't need to do that if you're doing G-code. So if you're using another slicer to create your G-code, you don't really need to set one up other than so that it knows that you have a printer. But then it gives you the information on the nozzle temperature. Notice I've already set these, and then I can come back later and manually slide these. And I can also click the camera here and get a snapshot of the bed. Snapshot of the bed. Well, maybe it doesn't work until it's actually started, but oh, I know why. I don't actually have it on, so it's never going to heat up. I don't have the power on. What's funny is that with the Console Clear, even though you plug it in the USB, you're supplying power to the it's not the Rambo board, the Marlin board, but I don't have any power to any of the motors or anything. So with that being said, it obviously isn't going to give me a camera. But the camera works, and you can take snapshots. It's not video, and then you can tell it how often you can do snapshots, so you can constantly monitor it. So I think that's pretty cool.
That is very
cool. It works, and it's very reasonably priced. And like I said, there is a cloud function for this, but it's to do the slicing, and you can still also look at some of the remote control functionality. There is limited actual control of your printer from the cloud or this interface. Let's see if I can cancel it. Let's see what we can bring up. So you have some controls, but you know, it's the standard controls, and they do work surprisingly well. So you can click on that. What else? You can go to settings. You can identify your printer rate, and then you can create the number of extruders. They just supported multiple extruders now. And then identify your internet connection. And then it's got both the hotspot. Actually, I don't want to run the hotspot. So if you've got one of those little Wi-Fi USB dongles, you can put it, and it will act like a hotspot. So you don't even need to have a router. You can connect to it directly through its own hotspot. So pretty advanced. They're going to add some new features, add new features to the slicer. I wasn't able to get the slicer working for what I did, but as mentioned, I like the G-code functionality because I can use whatever slicer I want. Pretty cool product. Like it. I don't, let's see, do they have a link that takes you out to them? Oh, well, I'll leave that to later. But go out there. You know, it's very reasonable. You can either buy their Astrobox or you can just get the downloadable image for your own Raspberry Pi. So on that, this was a Kickstarter that had been sitting on the shelf. I then also had another one called Red Pitaya. Are you familiar with this, Chris?
I am now.
Okay. This, I think, was also either an Indiegogo or Kickstarter. I think it was a Kickstarter. It was also reasonably priced. I think it was actually less than this, but essentially $470 gets you a fully computer-controlled two-channel, I think it's up to 4, but two-channel input, two-channel output. So what it shows you here is many $1,000s, which is pretty accurate. You get an oscilloscope, you get a waveform analyzer, and a generator, and actually a multifunction generator, as it shows here, or spectrum analyzer. And you just use standard probes you can get on eBay for like $20, and you've got yourself a full-fledged multifunction test equipment that is laboratory precise. So it's not one of these eBay specials. It also supports GPIO. That's the connector over here. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but if you want to do logic state analysis, that's capable. It has an Ethernet connection, has one USB port, and you can hook it up to one of the Wi-Fi dongles if you have one. I think it's Enermax, if I remember correctly. Very cheap. You can get one on Amazon for like $8, and make this into a completely remote terminal. And so I plan to do more with it. They have updates to all this software already. I think I may have lost it, but I was hoping to actually show it, but it didn't really have it because I don't have anything hooked up to it. But if you need an oscilloscope or a multimeter, hey, look into this because it also provides full computer control. You can actually use it because it's web-based from your phone. So you can put it in a remote location and monitor signals, or just use it as a standard oscilloscope. So if you don't have one, you might want to look into it. Very reasonably priced. The only problem is you don't have an actual screen built into it, but you can hook it up to a laptop or whatever you want to provide that. So if you've got an old laptop, it might be a good use for it. So pretty cool project. I have an oscilloscope, but it's fairly old, so this is a welcome addition. And again, it's Red Pitaya or Pitaya, or Pitaya, I don't know. Somebody pronounce that correctly for me. Okay, so that's about it, except one more item, and I actually can demonstrate it, and that is the grip. This is another project I've been working on. I had one of my customers who bought my 4Eyes bring this to my attention, so I contacted them, and they sent me out a unit that I've already modified, but essentially, you probably know where I'm going with this. This is a Bluetooth grip with a handle that has controls in it. And essentially, it's got an iOS SDK that you can incorporate into an app and provide functionality. So immediately, I'm thinking, because right now I have a single operation. I'm going to go ahead and jump to that camera now so that you can take a look at it. This is it. So essentially, I have the 4 eyes attached. I modified the case that they have with it. It's a 5S case, but also works with the iPod Touch. And I modified it so that it sits on the handle. It's very lightweight. Let me grip it properly. Oh, I have it on backwards. Sorry. Let me show you. It's really neat because you can detach it very quickly. I say that. It's a little... Hang on there. There. So you can detach the handle from the case so that, and then my particular case, you remember, Chris, I can remove the structure sensor fairly easy, and you can still make it more portable. As I mentioned, it has a built-in battery into the base. It's like one of those coin batteries, and it's Bluetooth that hooks up to the Bluetooth of your iOS device and provides 3 controls: a trigger right here, and then a plus and minus button, which can be reprogrammed. The camera app that they provide, it's used for zoom, but I'm looking at using the trigger to identify start scans, and then the plus and minus to modify the bounding box, or with the Skanect software to either save a scan or delete a scan. So that's the direction I want to go. And even, I mean, they really thought this out. You can remove the base. Let me see if I can find the control. And then have a separate attachment, which is the control unit. And you can put this, because it has, and I put a little tripod base. Let me do this. So can you see that? So now I've got it attached to this little base. You can put that on a tripod and then do remote control, because you can take this with you and start your scans without even being next to this, maybe by your computer, and put it, you know, how we used a rotating platform, a little motorized Lazy Susan. So essentially, you could put this on a tripod, do that, and have remote control functionality. So that's what the direction I'm going with this, and it will be in addition to the 4 eyes line, probably in the next month or two. I'm making an iPhone 6 case that will work with it as well. So pretty cool device. If you've got an iOS device, you might want to look into it. I think it's like $79.80, and they've got a large number of accessories that you can go out to. If you're a developer, they have an SDK for it. So let me jump back to it. So that is the Grip and Shoop. It's not a very original name, but GS.
It's cool.
But a cool device, and it's very lightweight, and I think it's going to really help out those who are doing 3D scanning with the structure sensor when I get done with it. So
Awesome.
Hats off to Ben from Grip and Shoot. And that's pretty much all of my items. Let me look through my notes. As I said, I did have a packed week. Let's see, products of the week. Yeah, so I just showed those all off, and then let's go into your print and whisper, and then I'll end it with a mini 101 and seeing what's up in the news or events coming up. All right, cool. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so my next, my print whisperer tip of the week here is something I use a lot, which is IRC is your friend. IRC, it's been around for a long time. It's never gone out of style. Internet Relay Chat is what IRC stands for. What you want to do is you want to go over and you want to pick yourself up a copy of a program I use. This is my IRC weapon of choice, which is called Pigeon. It's free. I think it comes from the same people that brought us Mozilla, or the same people that bring us Firefox. Maybe not. I think they may have their own. And I know Thunderbird, the email client from Mozilla, will tap into IRC. However, so what you want to do is you want to tap into Pigeon, and then next you want to open it up and go into your. You want to basically set up a channel for DLP. Or to join some chatting channels, and two of my favorites that are 3D print related are DLP 3D printing and the RepRap channel. And as you can see, the RepRap channel has 512 people in the room. DLP 3D printing as 34. It's a little bit smaller, but it's growing. And those two chat rooms. Yeah, go ahead.
This is the one that Brad is in all the time, right?
DLP 3D printing is where you can find Brad all the time. RepRap is where you can find people like John Ollie from See Me CNC. A lot of those people are in there all the time. So if you have any questions at all that you want to, ask, you're having any problems with your 3D printer, or you just want to get steered in the right direction, it's a great place to put out a question and see if you can get an answer for it. And it's not just 3D printing. I mean, even SparkFun, which is one of my favorite electronics distributors out of Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, they have their own SparkFun IRC channel on Freenode, and you can connect to them, and like if you buy anything from them, instead of having to call them or go to a forum where it might take a day or two or several days to get an answer, you might be able to just figure out, you might be able to just pop somebody at the company a question real quick, and there's all kinds of people waiting in the wings to answer your questions, and they'll just pop right on, and they'd love to help you. So here you can see people are having a conversation about the Intel Edison and using Octoprint, and you can switch over to DLP, and somebody was asking for me because I chimed in with a conversation a little earlier. So they're talking about the tilt motors being available for these little SLA printers. So it's a great resource for me. I use it. I pretty much hang out in the IRC channels all day. I just have it in the background, and I'll just leave the sound when somebody mentions my name, it'll ping me, and I'll jump right on, and like as you can see, here's Brad is he's asking about you, Mike.
What's he asking about?
He says, did you ever get your little RP printing?
No.
Not yet. So.
No,
Yeah,
that's
so,
one of my Kickstarter, actually. Yeah. No.
Rainy day projects.
It's one of my other rainy day. Holiday. That'll be my holiday project.
There you go. Yeah, so IRC, definitely a great resource. That's my Print Whisper tip of the day, and hope you find it as useful as I do.
Very cool. And what was that IRC chat program again?
The program I use is called Pidgin, P-I-D-G-I-N, Pidgin. So you can head out to, it's just pidgin.im is the website, and it's an open source.
And put a link in the show notes already on that one?
I don't know if I have, but here's the website here, Pidgin, Pidgin.im. And yeah, the IRC chat rooms are just tremendously valuable for any project you're working on, really. A lot of the underground, if you will, hangs out in IRC. So
underground.
It is the underground. It's like a place where you can go where even the oldest, I mean, in the early days of the internet, in the earliest stages of the internet, really, that I remember, this is what we did. It was all text-based chatting. That was how we were interacting with each other. There were no web pages. HTML wasn't around yet. There were no web browsers. It was, you were on, I remember, it was CompuServe was one of the first.
Actually, I used Genie. Do you remember Genie?
Genie. I remember, I think we had somebody that worked for us that used Genie, and he had the discs, the 3.5-inch disc. But we had CompuServe, and you would join a chat room, and you would chat with people, and you'd bond with them, and those are the first. And then there was. There
was always American Online. They were notorious for all their chat rooms.
Exactly, and you could go on and you could interact with people, and that was the genesis of what we know as the internet today. That was really what got it all started. Was these, and IRC has been around since then,
Eons.
and it has not gone away. It is not going away because it's essentially built on a totally different.
Yeah, it's
It
based
doesn't
on
require HTML. It's
yeah,
just
it's EDP controls, if I remember correctly. So it's very small, self-contained, and as you know, most of the software is very small, and you can do
and
it on
even if the
anything now.
internet itself went down, you could still set up an IRC network, and have interaction with people as a communication method, even if the actual internet itself went down. If you had point-to-point contact, you can set up IRC
You'd
networks
still need
yourself.
point-to-point.
Yeah.
Tin cans. Very cool. Well, thank you, Chris, and I totally agree with that. I remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, as I mentioned, using Genie, something similar. That's how I met Anthony Woods, now the CEO of Roku. He's out making lots of money, and I'm doing this silly podcast.
Well, don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and get into these chat rooms and interact with people. You can a lot of times you can Google what you're looking for all you want, and you might come up with nothing, or nothing that you're really, that's really valuable to you. But you can go to one of these chat rooms, and many times you could post a question, and somebody will answer you.
You know what, Chris? Maybe we should set up a little IRC for ourselves, so when we're doing this, people can communicate. You can be
There
our
you go.
IRC monitor. Okay, let me get on to my software of the week. What?
Some of these models are great.
Yeah. We've had Jesse on
like
before. We talked about MeshMixer. MeshMixer is a cool program, and okay, Chris. And I guess I better take you off the screen there. Okay. MeshMixer is a very neat program that allows you to do a lot of things for free. I mean, it is super. They've incorporated in this latest version 2.7 that you can download here. Let's see if I go there. It should take me to another page. We can go to the release notes. So these are some of the new features. It says October 26th, but I think it didn't come out then. I think it was a little bit later than that, or at least I didn't get a notice until like a week ago. So maybe that's my fault. All right. However, it's still a cool program. They've added more tools on using it with 3D printing now. I didn't know it had a deviation tool because it's new, and a clearance tool. So these are really neat if you want to verify tolerances, which I do. So I may be using that. And then now there's support structure generation. That's cool. Didn't know that you could do that within MeshMixer. And then you have a better measuring tool. I've used that before when I was doing my own filling for my teeth. If you remember several episodes back, I kind of gave a demo of how I was using this to make my own filling and printed it. And then the guy got sick, so we never went through with it. Plus, it was a little more expensive. Expensive experiment. Oh well. So what I thought I would go through today is kind of bring it up and show you some of the features of it. This is a person that I had scanned some time ago using the old Asus Action. Notice the detail isn't quite there versus the 4 eyes, but it's still pretty good. But if you notice, there's some extraneous garbage here. So one of the things I want to do is remove it. So you essentially what you do is you click on import, and if you're starting from scratch, you won't get this message, but then you go out and you can bring in STLs, PLYs, OBJs, pretty much anything that you want into this program. And obviously the more polygons you have, the longer it's going to take, and it may bog it down. So make sure you've got a fairly decent machine to work with it. If you click on the select button here, I'll jump back into it. You can use like a lasso effect, which we'll do here, and then we can select a series of polygons. Yeah, that worked well. Maybe it. Okay. Well, I think it probably sees it, but they're so small there. So then I can go in and edit by discarding. So you have all kinds of features once you select something that you can work with. So if I wanted to right now, I can erase and fill. Let's say if I was selecting an area that makes a hole, I can immediately fill it. Or you can discard it. Let's see. And as you can see, it removed it. So I want to do that down here. The only thing I don't like is it doesn't stick with the same tool, so you have to go back and do the whole thing over again. So again, we'll select. We'll go to discard. And it does have hotkeys, so if you want to learn them, it does expedite your process. There we go. So we now deleted that out of there. You have two different choices of how you can set up. Actually, I'll get into that. Preferences. You can either do navigation mode of the 1, 2, 3 or MeshMixers. MeshMixers requires you the keyboard. I like the 1, 2, 3D because it uses the mouse buttons. If you use the center or the wheel and push it down, it allows you to navigate the XY plane. If you use the mouse wheel to rotate it, you can zoom. And then, let's see, what's the other feature? Then if you hold the shift key down with the you can rotate your object. So shift key, mouse wheel, you can rotate. Holding it down with no keys allows you to move on the XY plane, and then the wheel allows you to zoom. So it's pretty intuitive. I find it easy to work with. And so now, once I've done that, and there's some holes in here, but I'm going to ignore it. If you see these little blue areas, these are areas that may have some holes or some deformities. These are what they call the edges. But I'm going to go right into sculpting because that's one of its strengths. And you can select different brushes. If you go into, let's say we'll use the draw tool, you can then vary the size and strength of your brush. And I suggest that you start out with a low strength, because if you start at a higher strength, I'll show you what happens. Well,
Yeah.
okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still pretty subtle, but if you have a lower polygon
I
mesh,
thought you were going
really,
to give her an enhancement of some
yeah, no.
sort. I saw you try that.
I wasn't doing that. Don't put words in my mouth. But notice as I increase the strength, and you can also improve the depth of the object itself. But you know, these different brushes, like if I wanted to flatten an area, let's turn up the strength. It's kind of hard to see from here, but so I think you get the idea. And the best thing to do is to experiment with it. If I wanted to inflate. One of the tools that I find very important is the smoothing tool. And you have multiple versions. You have a bubble smooth, and it kind of gives you an idea, a shrink smooth. And the bubble smooth kind of inflates but smooths at the same time. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Zoom. And it's very subtle. So it's a great way to smooth out, like some of your scans might have some issues, like in this area here. Notice how we're smoothing it. And it's very organic. And as you can see, it doesn't take long to get a nice, smooth surface. And then let's say there's some ridges that we can actually inflate, which is a feature, which I use. And again, make sure you set your strengths so that it's more subtle. But notice what happens. It should inflate this area here. See what it's doing? See how this little crevice here is slowly disappearing?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good tool to fill in areas as well. So it takes a little bit of time, but man, it makes a difference. And it's free. That's the key thing. And then now that they have new print tools, which I haven't played with a lot because I use NetFab. I'm sorry, what were you saying, Chris?
I said it's great. It's unbelievable that MeshMixer is incorporating all this stuff nowadays.
Yeah, and it's free.
I love it.
And it really, other than ZBrush and the program I use, 3D Coat, there's not that many organic. But you can export it as an STL OBJL, a collada, or a file, if you're familiar with Blender. So you could bring it into Blender and some of the other open source tools, PLY, and of course the STL ASCII or binary files. And as mentioned, it also has a print functionality now. That allows you to, and here we got a MakerBot, but we can choose, remember we were talking about all the Stratasys models? So you have all kinds of Stratasys models to work with now. I'm hoping that they offer some other stuff, but you can also send it out to Sculpteo or Shapeway. So if you wanted to use an outside service to print, and then notice it's not even on the bed, so I would have to retransform it. But this is built into it. And I haven't used the support structures, but I'd like to see how well that works. If it is actually any good, I may start using it. But a very cool program. I'll bring it up again next week with some other features, but it's very powerful. Takes some time to get used to. They've got a lot of great tutorials out on their website, which I'll bring up here in a moment. Let's go back. So they've got a forum. Remember we were talking about forum. You know, the other thing, you mentioned chat rooms. Forums are another nice place to go to. Chat rooms are dynamic and instant, but forums allow you to post things and then people can get to your question. It's another real good resource. You've mentioned that on a previous show. They have their own forum. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if there's an IRC chat room somewhere for their program as well. But they've got a lot of demos, YouTube videos that you can go out and play with. Pretty cool program, and it's part of my tool set. So that's about it. So let's move into our last items, which is, give me a moment. I'll drop back to my cell. And that would be what's going on in the world. Well, one of the first things that I wanted to bring up is that I did, last Wednesday, Chris and I did get my frame here. This Wednesday, we did our interview with Dr. Robert Crockett, which was very interesting. You know, we think, we know everything about 3D. We don't. We don't know anything about 3D. And then we got people like Dr. Crockett, who's been using 3D since the 90s. This stuff has been around for some time. We're just babies in it. This guy was using, what was it called? The paper laminated? What was the technique?
LOM printing. LOM.
LOM. And, you know, if you're not familiar with the M-Core, you may never have heard of this technique, and it's been around for some time. They kind of died out, but it was interesting what he created, so check back on our episode Wednesday. And then I did a little special on, was it yesterday, a how-to, was it yesterday? Or maybe it was Wednesday as well, on how to use 4eyes, the structure sensor in Skanect. And I had an assistant, Rebecca here, work
Beautiful
with me.
assistant. Hi, Rebecca. It's great to finally meet you.
And she's quiet, and she was able to stay still for the scanning process. So she kind of helped me out there. So if you're wondering who that was, that's Rebecca. She's probably not going to be on any further shows. She makes a little too much noise and just is kind of distracting. But yeah,
Mike, I think you might
those
be
two are in the
spending a little too much time in your basement.
Okay. Yeah, that's what Siobhan says too. So finally, let's look at some upcoming events, and then we will be off doing other things today. Okay, so I will bounce back to my other screen. Come on, hurry up. There we go. So I've mentioned this before. It's called 3D Printing for Beginners, and they've got fairs and events, and they go out some time. I was normally just cutting and pasting from it, but I just thought I would use it as our source from now on. But if we drop down, we've only got one event that they're showing, and that's in Washington, D.C. between the 8th and the 10th, so starting next week. It appears it's a professional, from $100 to $2,000 to get into it, so I'm assuming that's some of the seminar. So if you're working with the government, might be something to look at, additive manufacturing for the government. And then if we jump into January, but we'll be back around in the next couple of weeks, we have some other shows, so I'll talk about that later. But again, if you drop out to 3D Printers for Beginners /fairs_events/ you'll head out to this site that I'm at and find out what's going on in the world. So on that, I'm kind of out of things to talk about.
Intellectual ammo. All right. Well, thanks so much, listeners, for joining us on our weekly edition of Weekly Roundup on all things 3D. And we'll see you in the IRC chat room, hopefully.
Yep. And next week, right?
And we'll see you at the same time next week.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.